Here we
Hi,
go.
everybody. Welcome. So I'm Catherine Bell, and I'm with Russ Hudson today, and we're going to be talking about the instincts. And the instincts are so fundamental to who we are. And this is the last of our series. So email me with any kind of anything you'd like us to follow up on, any topics that kind of spark your interest. So it's Catherine at awakenedcompany.com. That's CATHERINE at awakenedcompany.com. So Russ, for everybody, why are the instincts are important? Like, why are they relevant?
Well, instincts are more primal and have a lot more to do with our decisions than a lot of our other elements of our type structure. Whether we like it or not, we still have animal nature. We're part of the world, we're part of nature. And so we still have these kind of evolutionary drives that are left over from when, we evolved from, cavemen and earlier. So, these drives are important because they're the intelligence that keeps us alive, both as an individual but also as a species. They're really the intelligence so that we can survive and if possible, thrive on planet Earth. So, they're very important. And when there are difficulties or challenges, the instincts are going to come into the fore because they're about survival in various ways. Now, the other reason they're important is because a lot of our neurotic and less desirable traits are deeply entwined with the instincts. And when we misbehave, we usually do so through the filter of one of these instinctual clusters, we might say.
Great.
So those are good reasons, I think.
Those are very, very good reasons. I think every leader should know, and every person should know what instinct they lead with and what they have to work on.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into the instincts, and you're going to discuss which instinct, describe each instinct and how it plays up during a time like this. However, before we do so, maybe you can lead us through a grounding first, Russ.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, we use the word instinct. It's not 100% accurate. It's more accurate than calling the what we're talking about subtypes, because they're not really subtypes of anything. They maybe are when we mix with our Enneagram pattern, but they're collections of drives. They're collections of impulses. They're what we most value on a very kind of a gut level. But one thing very interesting about them is that you can most readily find them somatically because they're sensations, and they can really help us be present when we pay attention to them. So, for example, wherever I may be right now, I could take a few deeper breaths and slow things down a bit internally. Yeah. And then to just, in a sense, listen to my body. Something very few people do regularly. Can I feel if I've eaten recently or if I'm hungry, for example? That's not a thought. It's not an emotion. It's a sensation. My body will tell me how I'm doing with the need or lack of need for food, or where I am in a digestion process. If I need water or hydration, it's a sensation. If I'm well hydrated, my body knows that. I don't need to think about it. My feelings about that are irrelevant. If I'm cold, chilled a little bit, or if I'm too warm, instant feedback. If my body is tense or there are places that are kind of jammed up, body will let me know. Now, when we're actually present, we're listening to our body, and it's giving us constant feedback about how we're doing and what we might need and what we've had enough of. And so that's really important information that usually our personality has such a loud signal, it kind of overrides that listening, either by ignoring it or sometimes alternatively by getting freaked out about it. Our fears and concerns about the instinct that come out of our history may dominate actually listening to the instinct itself. So just take a moment. You can just check in with your body. And it's a good regular practice to do, regardless of which we perceive as our, quote, dominant instinct, our dominant subtype, whatever you want to call it. Learning to listen to that is a corrective, wherever it may sit in our psychological arrangements. I'm doing that myself and getting very particular feedback, information that my personality doesn't know about. And then sensing that, notice how paying attention to the body brings me into more focus and presence, gets me more grounded, gets me less fear-based. Even if I was very hungry, being present with the hunger would be very different than letting my fears about not having food run amok in me. You see? So now we turn our attention a little bit toward the second instinct, which we call the sexual or the attraction instinct. Some people call it one-on-one. I think that's slightly misleading. I understand why people use it, of course, but it isn't really about intimacy. It's not about connection. It's about the state of excitation and activation of my nervous system. It's how turned on I am. And it goes beyond sexuality specifically, but it definitely includes sexuality. So when we look at this in terms of sensation, there's a kind of feeling of the kind of tingly, electrical, stimulating energy. And usually you can find that at some parts of your body. Some of us, the battery might be really charged up. Some of us, the battery might be a bit lower. But you can feel your charge. A lot of times you can feel it in your extremities. Hands are a good place. Feet are a good place. But you may feel it in other places. I'm feeling it in my spine right now. Kind of moving in a deep place behind my shoulder blades. And as you check in and pay attention, you'll feel this energy not as something static, but it almost flows and moves around different parts of the body as if it had a fluid property, even though it feels very much like just pure energy, electricity, very much like a tingle like you'd get from a battery. And if you're really sensing your body to some degree, unless you're dead, you're going to notice some of that energy. However faint or soft it may be, there's some there. And then, last but not least, we have our social instinct, which Claudio Naranjo and I also have called the adaptation instinct. And that's about how we, and this is a little counterintuitive at first, how we sense what's in and around us. Not just messages from the body about how we're doing and what we need, but messages about where we are, what are the circumstances we're in, what is the energy around me. Through my body, I can sense the quality of what's around me. I can also sense, as I relax, how my energy system is participating in what's around me. All the more so if there are other beings around, be they humans or animals, right? If my dog or cat pet was here with me, I feel the presence of that being. And my body understands, knows something about the relatedness with who or whatever is around me, or if no one is around me right now. I can feel that as a kind of category of sensation. It's a little harder to describe that than the sexual instinct, for example, but you can notice it. You can notice, I can notice how closed or how open I am. Some moments I feel more shut down in relation to the environment, but generally as I relax, there's a sense of almost like I extend out past my boundaries and I'm sensing a bigger field, you could say, where I'm taking in what's again around us and what's in us and so forth. And if you put all three of those together, that would be a pretty good indication that you're somewhat grounded in your body. And I just invite you to consider that as you do inner work, being present isn't just, sitting there in a position for a few minutes. It would be opening to the many layers of body intelligence as a grounding in the here and now. Yeah. Thank you. And you can do that anytime at home. Comes in mighty handy. As we'll see, when we're getting freaked out on an instinctual level, we can come back to actually listening to our real instincts, which will give us much more relevant information about what we actually need versus what we're ignoring or what we're getting scared about. Thank you. So are you going to ask me a question, Catherine?
So thank you, Russ. So describe the self-pres, sexual, and social instincts in terms of when we get activated. And
Sure.
what we can do to bring in the other instincts or simmer down that particular instinct.
Yeah, sure. Well, what I really hope I wanted to start, and I'm glad we started with that centering, because all the instincts in their pure form are super helpful and necessary. And whatever your psychological arrangement might be, you have all three. Nobody is missing any instincts, I guarantee you. They may get expressed in different ways, given our history, our culture, our gender, all kinds of things. But everybody has all three of the instincts, just like we have got all three of our centers. So if we are present, the instincts just do what they're supposed to do. If I'm tired, I get that sensation. Self-pres instinct tells me you are tired, your body needs rest, and then you rest. If you're hungry, you get food. If you're thirsty, if you need shelter, you make sure you've got shelter and you pay your bills so you can keep your shelter, or you go out to find ways to pay those bills. So what I want to say is that when we're running our personality, our Enneagram type distorts the instincts in particular ways. So then it would be fair to say that fear runs the instinct instead of the instinct doing what it's just supposed to do. So, for example, there's a big difference between noticing that I need food and being freaked out or nervous so that I'm starving or something. And so I'm constantly eating. Like when self-pres goes off, one thing that might happen is I might overeat because my anxiety about survival doesn't deactivate and I eat more food than I actually need to. I'm not actually listening to the instinct. On the other hand, there are people who have self-pres strongly in their mix and they have eating disorders where they're trying to control their appetite. Again, it's ego stuff stepping in to the instinctual domain and distorting it in various ways. So when we are in a time like we're in now, when we're dealing with this and we're in quarantine, some of us are in lockdown and we're in our houses, various self-pres anxieties are going to come up. Do we have all the supplies we need? You know, you're aware of people. What do you suppose was going on when people bought out an entire grocery store of toilet paper? What do you think that was about? That's hoarding, and that's, oh God, I'm not going to have enough. And we've got sort of blinders on. We probably got enough toilet paper to last for the next 5 years, let alone this epidemic. But you know, when these things get activated, they're intense, and they flood our consciousness. It doesn't help us at all to shame ourselves or others about it. We already have a lot of shame about it. Anybody here have eating problems and doesn't have shame about it? Let's get real. We have a lot of ego issues and self attack and all kinds of stuff. And when these get triggered, they seem non-negotiable because they seem like life and death. Because it's plugged into instinct, it seems like survival. So we do things. So, you know, we all need to have self-pres instinct right now. And even if it's not our strong suit, we're learning we need new habits. We need to wash our hands. We need to wear masks in public. We need to keep social distancing. We need to be mindful of a lot of things that we aren't usual, because if we're not, it threatens our survival. That's self-pres. So you can see how we could take that on with a certain groundedness, sobriety, a certain courage. And at the same time, you might also get scared or freaked out, or your personality runs away with you, and it turns into something that doesn't necessarily enhance your survival odds. You know, you might have all the supplies you need and die of anxiety, and you still get a heart attack, you know. So I'm just saying, people, when we have those kind of blinders on, we don't have a reliable read of the situation. And there are people who, and this is where some of the other instincts come in, for example, where social and self-pres come together. There are people in the health professions now who, out of their social instinct, are putting themselves in harm's way to help people who are sick, people working in hospitals, people working in ambulances, people working in service industries. And what you want to be aware of, those people too, because they're on the front line, we really hope that they're really being scrupulous and intelligent about their self-pres. There's not, the one thing interesting about this illness is it's training us that nature doesn't care about our privilege. It doesn't care about our address. It doesn't care about our religion. We need to be mindful. We need to be intelligent. We need to be in conscious connection with our self-pres instinct, and it's going to help more of us get through this. And that becomes important too, just because if I'm sloppy about it, I may make other people sick beyond ruining my own health. And I'm just using this illness as a metaphor to talk about it. And we all know the thing that when you're on an airline, remember those days? When we're on a flight and the flight attendants come on and they explain to you that if there's a depressurization in the cabin and those masks drop down, right? You want to put yours on first before you attend to a loved one or a child or something, because if you pass out, you can't help anybody. So in some sense, what self-pres teaches us beyond basic self-care is that self-care is really foundational if we're going to be there for others. If I get sick, I can't really help you, right? So this is a real interesting time to study that self-pres instinct, to really get familiar with my tripwires around it. Now, some people have this as their dominant, and so they're going to be more prone to having anxieties about it. or leading with that or thinking about that first. When it's your dominant, it doesn't mean you don't think about the others. It means you think about that first. It means that's your first priority. And as I've taught it, there are clusters of self-pres. It has to do with your basic self-care, sleep, food, rest, exercise, stuff like that. It has to do with your management of your resources. And that is, of course, time, energy, but also money, and being conscious of your resources. And in a time like this, where we don't know how long this thing is going to run, we're all being required, in a sense, to look more carefully at how we're managing our resources, maybe reconsidering some things. Our assumptions about things just being there in a certain way may be really shaken up for a lot of us. So we don't want to go to the fear there. We want to get centered, grounded, and from that grounded place, our self-pres instinct in combination with our balanced heart and mind will come up with way better solutions than me getting freaked out about all this stuff. And we will get freaked out sometimes, so we have to make some allowance for that. But we want to learn the way back home more quickly when that happens, right? That's a human expectation. We can do that. We can do that. The other side of the scale is some people just self-pres comes up and they deal with it, and that's good. But some of us really don't spend a lot of time with self-pres. We don't think about it. I've called it what it can be, what I call the blind spot. My colleague B. Chestnut calls it the repressed instinct. And we're getting at the same thing, that basically self-pres might be something that I've neglected most of my life. I don't think about money. I don't think about regularity. I don't think about resources. I'm not a homebody, right? And there are people for whom that is true. People who have that are really being challenged right now to step up to the plate, because we kind of have to think about it now. I can't just go out and hang out with my friends. I can't go out dating right now. I have to actually take care of myself and be responsible. I don't know who's going to have a job in a month, right? And I may have already lost mine. And so I have to get grounded and practical. So, when you have self-pres as your blind spot, it's also challenging in this time, because people with a low self-pres structure tend not to have a lot of regularity in their life. They kind of, I feel like eating now, I eat now. I want to rest now, I rest now. In a certain way, you can do that in these situations, but as we're living in close quarters with other people, more scheduling and regularity and cooperation is called for. So from the self-pres side, we may have rigidity about some of our habits of self-care and so forth that we have to alter. And that's social instinct helping self-pres. Some of us are used to just doing what we want to do when we want to do it. And some of us need to realize I've got to actually apply myself to some things that ordinarily would not be my pick. You see? And so that can be anywhere in that range. I always tell my students, the question is not which one of them am I? That's kind of a bogus question. All that gets you is being able to chat on the internet with other people who are into the Enneagram, but it doesn't really help you develop. It helps you to develop to see, what is my relationship with self-pres? What are my habits? Where am I clear and clean about it? And where am I a little neurotic, frankly, about it? Either in getting over determining, too rigid about it, or in being too lax or even neglecting it. Just, where am I with all that? I didn't say the third zone or the third area of self-pres is just domesticity, being at home and liking to be at home and making your home nice. So here's the thing. We all are having to be domestic right now. There's no choice. We have to be domestic. But one way that self-pres works here is in making that a pleasant experience, making it comfortable, making it work with other people, having this be a time of gestation rather than a time of imprisonment. This is a way you could think of it. So the second instinct is sexual. And, the challenge is sexual. We live in a society where we can't talk openly or honestly about that. It's sort of a taboo to go into talking about sexuality. And certainly what we're doing with sexuality during this time is an interesting question. Some of us are already in partnerships and, but there could be stresses on that in this time where we can't get away from each other. There can be stresses in terms of exaggerated expectations, and there can be stresses in terms of neglect or sexuality is about attraction and repulsion. What we're attracted to, what we're repelled by, what draws us, what pushes us away. It's like magnetism. And it has to do with not just people, not just sexual partners. It has to do with a lot of things. It has to do with what turns us on, what gets us juiced and flowing. So one thing I see, there's a couple of different problems I see with this during this epidemic. A lot, if you've been running on a certain kind of momentum and now that's broken, for a lot of people, there is this deep question of like, what do I want to put my time and attention into? What turns me on? What's got a little juice? I can only binge watch so many Netflix series, what am I doing with my energy and time? What gets my mojo working? And if you don't have anything like that, we tend to get depressed. We tend to get flat. If we don't have something that kind of stimulates and activates us, our spirits get really down. So that's one thing. The other side of it is in ordinary circumstances, the main distortion I see for sexual instinct is it tends to turn into narcissism. We tend to not be attracted to what's good for us. We tend to be attracted to what is psychologists would say a repetition compulsion. I keep dating the same a-hole over and over again. I keep falling for the same nonsense. I keep being attracted to things that are often not good for me. Anybody here attracted to things that aren't good? It's like the little devilish pull of something. And it isn't just comfort. That's more self-pres. Comforting ourselves is more self-pres. These are just little naughty rewards and things that we do to sort of get our energy going. It's a different kind of thing. And you can notice when you're doing that in a way that actually serves your aliveness, your energy, your spiritual fire, and when you're doing something that's actually just screwing around with you, right? So you want to be aware of that. Now, there can be the side where we're preoccupied. We want to be entertained and preoccupied and energized all the time. That's one end of it. And the other end of it is we resist anything like that. And that's where it's our blind spot. And that could be very problematic while we're stuck in this. We can't do our ordinary stuff. One thing I notice when people have some kind of resistance or difficulty with the sexual instinct or the attraction instinct is that they tend to have excessive responsibility. They tend to think other people can have fun, other people can have creativity, other people can do this, that, and the other thing, but I have to hold the world together. So there's a temptation during this time to really take that role on excessively, and it will be at great cost to your soul, right? I used to recommend for people who were having difficulty, if you need to work on your sexual instinct, it doesn't mean you need to have more sex necessarily. It doesn't mean you need to have an affair. It means doing something out of the box for you, doing something to break up your routine a little bit, doing something that brings fresh aliveness. Remember that activating, stimulating energy? Pay attention to what brings that forward and what diminishes it, right? All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? So and we're all different that way. And the way I find that maybe not how you do. And we don't get that by copying how somebody else does it. We have to find what's stimulating and awakening and enlivening for us. And the hunt for that is kind of fun. ooh, what's the juicy thing I'm going to find today? And just our attitude toward our day and how we're living at this time can be a good use of this, as opposed to just falling for these little devils that sit in wait on our path of the day. And you know what I'm talking about. And sometimes that devil can look like staying up too late watching dumb movies or TV shows, and that devil could look like the third cupcake. So we're all different that way. And I just say, the last thing I'd say is there's also, that energy can be in our emotions. What awakens us, stimulates us emotionally, obviously physically, that's mostly what I've been talking about, but it can also what stimulates our mind, what keeps our mind awake and interested, what keeps us from turning into some sort of a dull, boring, internally and externally kind of person. What there, my goodness, this is a time where you can read, you can study stuff, you can learn new things. That's kind of the sexual energy supporting the head center. And I'm just thinking of all this on the fly, so you're getting a little bit of me working with that energy as I'm talking with you. So the third one is social. This is a very interesting one. Social instinct is not about, the cliche that you'll hear is it's about being part of a group or liking to be in a group. And gee whiz, that will eliminate about 88% of the people who are social instinct dominant. A lot of people social instinct dominant are introverts. And a group can be a group of two. Social instinct isn't so much about group dynamics, although it does include that, but it's not the main thing. The main thing is awareness of others, awareness and caring of others. And as I've taught over and over, scientists can tell you the social instinct grew out of the beginning of animals caring for their babies, the hatchlings or their puppies, right? That not most of the animals on the planet don't do that. The creature hatches, it's on its own, right? Whereas some animals have, because those animals take longer to develop, the adult animals have to have an instinct to stay there and protect and attend to the baby. And the zones here have to do about reading other people, reading where they're at emotionally, reading faces, reading between the lines, interpreting what people mean when they say something that may not be exactly what they said. There is also here in social instinct, reading needs, recognizing needs. There's this. The second part is just creating and building connections. Some people think that's sexual because of this one-on-one stuff. When you say one-on-one, it kind of blurs the social and sexual. That's my problem. If you take enough time to distinguish what you mean by that, then maybe it's okay. But sexual is not intimacy. Intimacy is from the heart. Sexual instinct is life energy. It's mojo, right? They're not the same. Social instinct is about connection. It's about making connections and keeping them if they're important to you, right? And the third thing is participation and contribution, which becomes a very important part in this time. So one of the questions the social instinct will ask us is, what can I do? There's a lot of people who need help and support right now. Maybe I don't have medical training, but there's probably some things I can do. And to just notice the enormous, most of us have some kind of resistance to participating or doing things that help others out. I think Canada does better at this than the United States, but North America, we're all kind of rugged individualists and we do our own thing. And we got that kind of going in our head. But that idea that we exist to support each other, that reciprocal connection is central for our survival and our existence, is something we kind of rediscover. We find that out again and again experientially, and we realize how happy it makes us when we're able to be there for somebody, when we're able to do something that's a contribution, whatever it is. We all have different talents. We have different gifts. And if we're thinking about it, social instinct will help us see ways that we can do something to get us all through this experience sooner rather than later. Or let's say, even if it can't be sooner, with the least loss of life, property, and sanity. So, social, I didn't say the 3 zones of sexual, and people are going to ask, so I better say them. They're attraction and being attracted. They're how we get others attracted to us and what we're attracted to, beyond just people, anything, what attracts us. Second is exploring edge, exploration. What have I not done? What's out there? What's new? It's getting out of your box, in short. The energy that gets us out of our box. When animals, if they just stay in their burrow, they're not going to find a mate. They got to get out and put themselves at risk, in a sense, have an adventure to have the opportunity to mate in nature. And we're like that too. Human beings would not have gotten far if we just stayed safe in our caves. We had to go out. And then the third element is what I call merging or fusion, where it's just getting intensely involved in something. And I think that's kind of where the one-on-one idea came from. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure you had that in there, because people will ask, and I understand. So when we think about all this, and we think about it in terms of the crisis we're in, there's the opportunity to engage our instincts in terms of practice, where our practice isn't just, our practice is great if it's helping us get grounded and calm down a little bit. That never hurts. But it can also include coming back to a balance point with our instinctual drives. We're going to have, as I said, we have all 3. But when we're running just from our ego, from our personality, there's a way we habitually connect those, and usually not in a balanced way. So as I come back to myself and give a little time to each one of them, a little loving attention, how's my self-pres doing now? And it gives me data about how I'm doing that day. And, if especially when we're checking to see if there's symptoms, if we're sick, that there's a way of checking in that isn't just driving all this fear about it, you see. Then you can also check in with your activation and energy as you're moving through your life each day. What galvanizes you? What attracts you? What raises your energy? What lowers your energy? And to be conscious of that. Doesn't mean you want to have high energy all the time, but it means you're conscious and responsible for how you are with your energy. And then thirdly, you're aware of that, even though you might feel lonely sometimes, and most of us will and do, you're not alone. You're connected. You're part of this. Other people, believe it or not, are probably thinking about you. Believe it or not, there are people you're thinking about. And there are things that you can do that help weave a net of survival, support, and everybody likes to know that somebody's got their back. And even in those times where I don't know if anybody's got my back, I can be the one who has somebody else's back. And that ends up being more than fulfilling. It's one of the greatest sources of appreciating our life that we can have. It usually feels pretty yummy when we can be there for somebody who needs us. And you're also going to see that these things don't exist in separate rooms or in boxes. They're in constant dialogue. They're interconnected. They're part of the whole web of your survival system. And so, as I said, healthcare workers out there risking their lives to save other people's lives. Well, that's social instinct, but you can bet there's a part of them that gets a lot of energy out of that, or they wouldn't do it. And thirdly, they also are hopefully taking care of themselves and taking a lot of precautions. I'm in Connecticut right now, and I was talking to my sister, and one of her friends is in the hospital, and so far only one person working in the hospital has gotten sick. Everybody else, large group of people working, they're maintaining intelligent protocols, they're taking care of themselves, which makes them able to stay motivated and energized and to provide what will support the people who are there for their help. So we may or may not be in a medical profession, but you can bet there will be opportunities for self-care, opportunities to see what charges us up, and opportunities to see what we have that can help everybody else in our particular world. If we do that, then this time will be time well spent. Yeah.
Thank you, Russ. So I've been getting a ton of private messages
Oh dear.
questions for you. With questions for you. So are you?
Everybody always has questions about this because it's a very important part of the Enneagram, but it's not. It's often oversimplified in a way that confuses people. That people are trying to make it simpler, but it gets confusing because it doesn't cover the complexities and nuance of real human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I just also say, folks, about the Enneagram in general, the idea is not to find a way to cram yourself into one of these categories. It's not like, oh, well, I'm self-pres or I'm sexual or which one am I? Fit yourself in there. These are just distinctions human beings have made for us to start the process of really looking and understanding how we automatically operate in the world. Because when we see how we automatically operate, that's what gives us that little window of freedom where we can maybe choose some new behaviors, some growth edges. And that's what it's really for.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to just be a category. As I keep saying, we have all three instincts. And that's what's my relationship with each one of them? That is a helpful question. Right?
Yes. And well, one of the questions was, what leads, your type or your instinct?
Well, it's funny to say lead. I wouldn't use the word lead.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that they get locked together when we are present. Everything kind of spontaneously operates quite nicely. Our body, heart, and mind, our lenses of these different intelligences function as they need to. Our instincts function as they need to. Everything's pretty groovy. But when we're not present, we're locked in habitual patterns that were developed when we're very young. We might have been born with some of them come from our culture, some of them are our own history of difficulty and trauma and so forth. But when they're locked together, they can't really help each other. The formula I used to use and the basis of so-called subtype is the passion of the Enneagram type distorts the instinct, and the Enneagram type draws life from the instinctual energy. It has to get its gas somewhere. So it gets its gas from our life energy. The instincts are life force. They're life energy, different kinds, different flavors. So our personality will have a flavor of the fuel that it uses.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, our emotional needs, our egoic needs will distort. So, for example, I've used this example and everybody tends to get this. Have you ever been in a situation where you were, some relationship was going south and you just thought, if he or she doesn't call me, I'll just die. And it feels that way. That's a classic example. That's a heart emotional issue, a narcissistic issue, a childhood wound issue affecting your self-preservation instinct. You're going to die if you don't get that phone call. You see what I mean? So that's a way that personality is altering the experience. And so the instinct is no longer serving what it's there for. It's serving the life of the ego, not the life of the organism. So
Great.
it's not a simple this to this. It's an interactive system.
So I'd like Samar to come off mute because Samar's been buzzing in with quite a few questions, and maybe Samar, we'll get one more question in, and then we'll sign off for today. But Samar,
Okay.
can you take yourself off mute? And you've been buzzing in with some great questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Hi, Russ. I miss you
Hi,
so much.
Samar.
So I have two questions. The first one is we talk about the social dominant instinct when we are dominant in social, but also when we are being anti-social.
That's right.
So can you explain this? Can you explain the difference between being antisocial and when the social instinct is repressed and or when we are blind to it? So this
Right.
is my question.
Great. Yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot. And I'm glad you said it. You see, if I'm antisocial, I'm thinking about social. My attention's on social. I'm focused on how I don't want to be around people. And there's it's active in a sense. I'm avoiding people, right? That's an active choice. That's being antisocial. But I'm not thinking, my intention is not on sexual. It's not on self-pres. It's on social, but about what I don't like about it. You see what I'm saying? In the same way, some elements of self-pres can be reckless. People who are dominant self-pres can eat themselves to death or eat a lot of junk food because it makes them comfortable, or they're not intelligent with their resources. There's a lot of variations on this. Now, the difference is when it's a repressed center, as B calls it, or I call the blind spot, I just don't think about it. That's why I call it a blind spot. My attention is on another instinct. So if I'm socially blind that way, I'm just thinking about self-pres, or I'm thinking about sexual, and the social I don't think about it. I feel a kind of, if somebody points it out, I go, oh, yeah. But it's not like I'm against it. And if we let go of the idea that social is about socializing, which it's not, it all gets a lot clearer. People who are blind and social have trouble reading people, recognizing needs, interpreting what people really mean when they say something. They have difficulty feeling a sense of participation, and they have difficulty maintaining relationship. Now, no matter which one is dominant, we're not going to be good at all three zones. Usually if it's dominant, we're good at two of them, and one of them needs some work. That's why, for example, you could be self-pres and you could be very good at taking care of your health and you have a nice home, but you're not that good with money and resources. Or you could be working really hard and bring home the bacon, but you don't take care of yourself. And both are self-pres. They're not sexual and they're not social. So you just see the difference is, if it's a blind spot, it just means the attention's really on something else and it's not on this. If it's an active, if I'm antisocial and social's dominant, I'm thinking about social stuff all the time. I'm thinking about those kind of issues. I may be angry that I haven't found a way to participate. So I'm angry at society. That would be one way it could play out. But my attention is on social things, even though I'm having an adverse reaction to them. Does that help?
Yeah, very much. Can I ask the second question?
Sure.
I have listened to your explanation of the instinct. Maybe this is the 6th or 7th time, and I also have this feeling, and it might be coming from my imbalanced dominant sexual instinct, but if a self-preserving a person dominant, I mean, it seems like easier to fulfill. If I'm hungry, so I will go eat. If I'm cold, I will cover. If I'm tired, I will rest, and so on. And social as well. If I need to connect or to belong, so I will. It's easy to access to. So I will go and connect with others. But for sexual, it's just. It's not that easy. I just can go and merge and with someone. The fusion here is not an easy access. It's not immediate.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Sure. I think what we have to understand is that people who, for example, dominant and social might be around a lot of people, but given their difficulties, they're still not feeling connection. They could be really gifted at reading situations, but this is still not, if they're not present in it, it feels like it's never fulfilled. There are people I know, dominant self-pres, where they never have enough resources. They're in the less than 1% of wealthy people on the planet, and they still never feel they are secure enough or safe enough. So they just keep working themselves to death. So it isn't necessarily that the behavior may look externally like we're getting or successfully dealing with that instinct, but internally it may not feel that way. And you see, if other people were looking at you, Samar, I would dare to say they probably see you as a free spirit, very creative, very good with your energy and your flow and going to what turns you on and so forth. But they're not living inside you, where you are expressing now the fact that it feels difficult to access it from the inside. It looks different outside than as it is inside. That's one thing that applies to everything we're learning about the Enneagram. So I just say, in terms of sexual instinct, I think we find it, there is, of course, if we have that amazing conversation that everybody likes that, of course, if, you find somebody that you have that beautiful chemistry with, that's a real treasure, right? But on the other hand, we find it in things that, and again, from the force space, what triggers our sense of beauty. And you can have that sexual fusion with beautiful music. You can have it with beautiful art. You can have it with a lot of experiences in life. And as I said, the training for the sexual instinct, as far as I can tell, is to learn to pay an exquisite attention to what raises my energy and the feeling of the richness of my life, and what diminishes that, what brings my energy down. And as we pay attention to that, we start to find and build a life that has that. But the last thing I'll say is, when we're still neglecting our blind spot, whatever it may be, we're never going to feel fulfilled in the dominant. It's like a bucket with a hole in it, and we keep pouring water or whatever into it, and it never fills up. So when we do work on our neglected instinct, it helps us find more satisfaction in our dominant. That really surprised me when I found that out. But I just offer that. You've heard me talk about that in other ways, but it may land differently given the specific way we're talking about it right now.
Thank you so much. I love that.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome. Thank you.
So Russ,
Say hi to Egypt.
thank you so much for everything, Russ. The questions just keep on rolling in. So there's
I'm sure.
there's obviously a lot of energy around this.
People love this topic. They do.
Yeah. So we committed to this time. So just thank you, and we've gone over. So thank you so much for everything you've done and your thought leadership on this. And for everybody, please remember RussHudson.com, EnneagramInstitute.com. You also have the IVQ. We mentioned the Ready in the last call,
Yeah.
but the IVQ might be interesting for something for people.
Yeah, and I just say about all tests, they're just meant to be a launching pad. Don't make them the final determinant of anything, but they can be a good start to a conversation and an exploration. I think any tool that we have is like that. It's best if you take a test, if you got results, talk about it with somebody who knows you, or a coach or a counselor, or somebody who knows the Enneagram, and then it's interesting. But don't take tests as any final say of anything, and not just about the Enneagram. That's just in general.
Exactly. Well, thank you again, Russ. Great to see you, and great to have everybody on the call too.
Thank you. It was fun, and I wish you guys all a peaceful and productive time in this challenge we all face. May we not forget what our hearts are really about, and may we keep finding ways to have community, even though we can't be together physically. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Russ. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Good to see you.
Very nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Egypt. Oh, I'm in Bahrain.
You're in Bahrain. We'll say hi to Bahrain.
Yes,
Manama.
okay.
Say hi.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.